Sustainable kind of means just keeping things where they are, and regenerative means that health and vitality. So my name's Rick, and for most of my life I wasn't interested in the environment or farming or gardening or food or anything like that. I was really just into music and business. I had a business in where I grew up in Calgary for 10 years, painting actually. And what really started to change for me was when I had kids. My consciousness started to shift to more big picture thinking, and I really started to worry about what the world would be like for that my kids would grow up in. And so I started to get really bummed out actually, because I learned a lot of the problems that are facing the world, and they felt really insurmountable, and I kind of got depressed for a while. And then I started to do a lot of reading and research, and started seeing a lot of the solutions, and a lot of them seemed to be tagged with this keyword permaculture. It kept coming up in my consciousness as I was reading, and so really what it meant to me was that permaculture represented a set of solutions and things that we could actually do to make the world better, rather than just focusing on the things that are the problems. So that's me, and I want to thank everybody for coming out today. This is really awesome to see everybody, and I'm really happy to have you all here. So this morning we'll just do kind of an introduction to the concept of permaculture, and then we'll do some work talk, and then after lunch we'll do some more talking about specifically why we're doing what we're doing here, sort of a specific design in this location. So it sounds like most people have a bit of an understanding of what permaculture is, but I'll go through sort of the history and the definition of the concept. So the word permaculture began as a combination of permanent agriculture, and over time sort of morphed to mean permanent culture, as people realized that the design principles of permaculture could be applied to many different aspects of life other than just agriculture. So we can apply permaculture to landscapes, buildings, businesses, and even our entire communities and the way we live. Permaculture is tricky to define, because in our culture we've been trained to think in reductionism, which is sort of the idea that we take concepts and we break them down into their smallest possible parts in order to understand them. But permaculture is based on holistic thinking, which means that we have to take a view of the whole system, and the interconnections of the parts and the way that energy flows through systems. So this is difficult for English, because English is actually in a way based around reductionism and concept of scientific materialism. So that just means the definition of permaculture has been tricky over time. It's been hard for people to really narrow it down into a short soundbite. But really the best definition that I've found is that permaculture is an ethical design science which supplies all of humanity's needs while improving the environment.
I'm not sure I understood what you're talking about reduction. What do you mean?
Reductionism. So the concept of reductionism is it's a way of looking at things where, in order to understand them, we break it down into its smallest parts. You know what I mean? And this is really helpful in science. So what they would do is sort of take a chair, for example. What's the chair made out of? What are all the parts? And we try to understand the chair by breaking it down into its pieces. And this works pretty well for certain aspects of life. It tends to be the inanimate objects, right? We've done this really well with matter, like we break down atoms into their parts.
What was the third ethic again?
It's return return of surplus. Yeah, also known as, initially they defined it as set limits to consumption and population. So that was a bit confusing for people, so they sort of switched it to return of surplus. Also, sometimes it's known as fair share. So people care, earth care, fair share. It just makes a nice rhyming triplet that's easy to remember. But yeah, initially it was set limits on population and consumption. And so I think people found that a bit unwieldy. But it sort of says the same thing, right? If we set limits on our population or population of a certain species that we raise or something, then we're going to be sort of living at a scale that's sustainable. So the prime directive of permaculture, it's a quote from Bill Mollison. He says that the only ethical decision is to take responsibility for our own existence and for that of our children. And so I'm really happy to see some whole families here and some young people who are gaining a lot of wisdom. And I wish I had your guys' wisdom when I was your age. That's really great. So why do we need permaculture? We're going to quickly run through like some of the major problems in the world. So try not to get depressed. A lot of people think, well, why do we need to do this? You know, things look fine. I'm not seeing any major issues around me in my backyard, right? So it helps to take a wider view and kind of see the general trajectory of the world that we're in right now, and sort of this broader view is really helpful to know why we need to take action, even though things might not look, on a small zoomed in perspective, they might not look too bad, but there are some major issues that we're coming up to all at once. The crises seem to be converging. Okay, so the first one is deforestation. So in the last several hundred years, 50% of the world's tropical forests have been destroyed. Deforestation is the second largest anthropogenic, which means human-caused, source of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, ranging between 6% and 17%. Right, so by cutting down the trees, all that carbon that's actually physically in the trees is being released to the atmosphere either through burning or just oxidation. Not to mention the carbon sequestering effects of the trees that are not then taking place once the trees are cut. And this is actually a big problem here in BC, I would say. You know, we have a lot of clear cutting. If you look around on Google Earth and you get outside of sort of the view of the highway, you know, just past the ridges, there's massive scars on the land where they're taking down trees and replanting eventually with usually single species, I think, that are not really a functional ecosystem. And this deforestation, it's connected to, of course, to soil erosion, because once you remove the trees, the soil is exposed to rain and sun and wind, and can then run downstream. Other problems that can happen, you know, obviously we're losing habitat through the deforestation and species are going extinct. The soil is losing its organic matter that way, and then it's not able to soak up the water that it normally does, and that could be contributing to these floods that we're having more recently. I mean, you know, the last 3 years, let's see, I lived in Calgary in 2013 and we had a 1 in 200 year flood event. And now here we are, it's 4 years later in BC, we have a 1 in who knows how many 100-year flood event. And these things, you know, within the span of a few years of each other, just doesn't seem like it's really going to be a 1 in 100 or 200 year flood event anymore. So soil degradation is the next big one that I want to talk about. So half of the planet's topsoil has been lost in the last 150 years. It's obviously connected to clear cutting of trees and forests to grow crops. Monocultures in agriculture are extremely degrading soils. Yeah, I was looking for another word, but yeah. They're degrading the soils because of annual tillage, right? They till the soil every year in order to plant the grains, especially it's mostly corn and soy in America and Canada. Canola is another big one. And then, once the soil is exposed, it's subject to blow away, it's subject to running off by water. Um, Topsoil is actually the largest export of the United States. So they're
Really?
exporting more tonnage of topsoil into the ocean than they are any other product to another country.
Oh, it's going into the ocean, not to countries.
That's right.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because so the whole, you think of the whole Midwest of the United States, most of it feeds into the Mississippi water catchment. So it all goes into the Mississippi River eventually and down past New Orleans and into the Gulf of Mexico, right? That's the biggest sort of drainage of the whole continent. And with the industrial agriculture, plowing, the water blows, right? And it blows, or sorry, the soil blows away when the wind comes because the soil has been exposed through the plows and the tillage. It blows and it can run off then, right? You think of if there's a living ecosystem, then not much soil exits that system. It's all kind of tied up with roots. But if there's no living plants on that soil anymore, it has the potential to just blow into the lowest point, which happens to be the river, the creeks, the rivers. And
So
then it
that'll
just,
take all the organisms out of the soil too then.
oh yeah, there's the soil winds up, cracked and dry and completely devoid of life. And soil is actually our most basic resource. You see that in ancient cultures, places where civilization began, the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East. This is a place that was named the Fertile Crescent for a reason. There was lush forests, fields, deep topsoil, and that's where humanity began agriculture, according to what we know right now. And now it's a desert. We see that everywhere. It happened in Greece. It happened. It's happened a lot in China and Africa, places that used to be lush and fertile. Agriculture over several hundred to several thousand years has just slowly degraded the topsoil to the point where there's no soil remaining, and then it becomes a desert. So soil actually is the basic resource of civilization.
I have a question on that.
Yeah.
I myself, I don't use pesticide where I am, and but you cannot live with, I don't know, well, I can, but it's hard, 3 feet of hay or other plants that you have there. So I decided to cut it like, I don't know, 10 inches from the ground, so not to kill them completely,
Yeah.
but make it possible for me to walk in a safe way.
Right.
And also that the root system will do their life, these
Yes.
plants.
Yeah.
And also in a way to respect them, because I leave quite a bit of places for them to live. I mean the grass, the weeds, whatever. I give them respect.
Yeah.
But is it a good idea to prevent the erosion of the land, to leave it in a 10-inch high or something like this, so the roots still?
From what I know, as long as the root system is intact, you won't get too much erosion. There'll always be some in specific areas. Where I live in the West Bench of Penticton, it's very silty. It's soft, silty clay, and in some areas, no matter what is there, it could erode. It's a really soft, silty clay. But for the most part, if you keep roots in the ground, even if you chop the plants right down to their base, keeping that root in the ground is going to feed the soil food web, and that's what prevents the erosion. So, yeah, go ahead and mow. That's no problem. You'll be good. And then, my next thing was actually on energy return on energy invested. So we're coming up against people here heard about peak oil and things like this a bit? Yeah. So this is the concept that eventually, when we started digging oil out of the ground, it was like a revelation for the human species, right? We found this extremely energy-dense energy source that was really easy to get. All we had to do was basically stick a pipe in the ground and came out, right? Easy. And this amazing stuff that we could use to heat our homes and fuel our engines for all kinds of different purposes, and Eventually, they even learned how to convert that material into fertilizer to grow food. So this amazing substance that in the early days of oil production, it only took 1 unit of energy to get 100 units of energy out, sometimes even up to 200 in West Texas or Saudi Arabia. So these historic oil and gas fields are have an extremely high energy return on energy invested. Now over time, this has gone down. We've used up all the easy to get oil, and now we're moving into sort of the secondary sources, right? These things today like shale oil and tar sands and offshore oil. These things are takes a lot more work, a lot more energy invested to get the energy out. Fracking, yeah, exactly. So these things are down around, it can be 40, 50, 30, sometimes even as low as 8 and just over 1. Some of them are just over 1, like shale oil, which is fracking, like you're talking about, shale gas. Yeah. It's barely worth it. You're maybe getting 1.5 of the energy out that you're putting in. So, imagine that, right? It's almost like planting a crop where you have to put in a pound of seed to get 1.5 pounds of produce out. It's really a lot of work for it to get out. And we know that scientists have done studies that there's a certain line, the more net energy we have as a society, the more services we can provide for our people, the more complexity we can have in our civilization. And there's a certain line beyond which industrial civilization sort of falls off, where it can't continue to function as it has. And they think that's around 8-1. So we're still sort of riding the wave of the easy oil deposits that we've extracted, but the things that we're discovering now are well below that. So we really have to think about our alternative energy sources. Solar and wind are right around that line, so we're just barely able to sustain an industrial civilization with these technologies. There are problems with solar and wind that you don't hear about a lot, like the rare earth minerals that you need to build the solar panels and all the mining that has to take place. The mining machines aren't running on solar, right? They're running on fuel still. So the point of that is we're going to have to use a lot less energy in the future to supply our needs. And while we still have this cheap energy, it's our moral obligation to implement systems that will need less energy in the future. So we need to use the oil now to some degree. For example, up top you guys will see we have these swales that we dug using a excavator, right? And so a little bit of oil invested now can have effects for hundreds to thousands of years that will benefit people. So,
Rick, what is a swale?
Sure, a swale. Okay, yeah, we're going to talk about that. A swale is technically a ditch on contour, and contour means level, basically. So we find the level line of the land, and we dig a ditch on that line, basically. So there's a mound on the lower downhill side and a ditch on the uphill side.
All along the same elevation.
Right, yeah. So just a flat sort of ditch that follows the lay of the land. Yep.
Just, you were saying about peak oil, I just wanted to put one comment in.
Sure.
That actually we're using so much oil that our consumption grows by 2 billion barrels more every year.
Right.
And actually they predict that in 10 years from now it would just all be gone. And most people that I talk to about that don't believe that it would happen.
Yeah.
And but I think it will.
Yeah.
It does seem so.
You'll see a lot of statistics around, and it's hard to know what to believe, really. We get our exercise walking this hill, though. Hey, no cameras.
and a natural swimming pool with natural plants to clean the water. So the woofers and we can go for a swim when it's plus 37 or more in the Okanagan Valley.
Great. They're just in the process of running, you know how we stepped over those bridges to get in here. They're just in the process of running the pipes up the hill. Right now they're pumping from one tank to another, sort of like a bucket brigade kind of system, and watering off those tanks.
By hand.
By hand, yeah.
So it comes up off the glue box all the way to the top to fill those?
I think that might be off the rainwater tanks.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure.
They're pumping uphill?
Yeah.
These tanks will not depreciate because of the sun, like the UV. It will not last 2 or 3 years, and then that's it.
Ideally, you either paint them or cover them. Yeah. Yeah, I painted mine at home. Ones that I have some for rainwater. Black paint. I just use gray because I had it, but yeah, any kind of opaque paint. It'll also keep algae from reproducing. So yeah, if the sun gets in there, they will have algae problems over time. And you can just put a tarp over it.
Anything?
Any kind of paint would be fine. Yeah, I mean, you know, it will wear off over time. So if you were really serious about it, I guess you could do a primer and then a paint. But,
Organic paint, so that when it wears off, doesn't pollute your
that would be good.
place.
Yeah, yeah, like a clay paint would be nice, but I don't know. They have it, I guess.
All right, so I'm here with Rick Hatch from Cherry Permaculture.
Yep.
Thanks for inviting me.
You bet.
It's been an awesome morning. I've learned lots, and really I got to get going, so I wanted to kind of just talk to you, and maybe you can kind of tell us what is the plan for the rest of the afternoon. Like, what are we kind of doing in this space right here?
Sure. Well, thanks a lot for coming, Brian. You've dropped us some knowledge as well about fungal soil interactions and how we can help the trees. So basically, we've designed a small, intensive food forest in this space here. If you pan out, you can see it. And a lot of the trees are still in pots. We haven't planted them yet, but what we did is we mapped out and dug some shallow swales. A swale is a ditch that's on contour, and that's designed to catch and release water slowly, and also be a barrier for organic material that will hit the swales and sort of bind up there and provide fertility for the plants. So what we have is a lot of dwarf apple trees, some pear trees, some peach trees, and quite a few support species. By that we mean other shrubs and plants that will provide fertility and mulch and shade for the trees so that they can thrive without any inputs of chemicals or fertilizers.
So what do you plan on doing with all this cardboard that's right here?
Right. So the idea for the cardboard is what we'll do anywhere where there's a tree, we'll put some compost down over top of the soil. Then we'll add the cardboard over top, and that acts as a weed barrier and also a moisture retention kind of thing, and also feeds the worms and fungi will grow on it. And then what we'll do is put down some mushroom compost, spent compost from Brian's farm, and then some wood chips over top. So it's sort of like a sheet mulch, what you call a sheet mulch, around the trees.
And we are going to do a little Kingstropharia patch as well.
You bet.
Maybe we'll bring you to that.
Sure, yeah.
That space right now. You know, the thing with Kingstropharia is it needs a lot of shade, and this cardboard is slippery. Kingstropharia needs a lot of shade, and this area gets a lot of sun. So we had to find a spot, and it's right in the corner here. I wasn't entirely sure what you were thinking, if you're going to build up a mound maybe or something like that.
Yeah, well, for the most part we leave this, this is the swale ditch. For the most part we leave that unfilled, but in this little area what we were thinking of doing is just sort of sectioning off a little area here and building up with wood chips, cardboard, and mycelium, the grain spawn. And that way we'll sort of build a little patch of Kingstropharia, and that can be spread from there once it fruits and once it colonizes the wood chips. So that's kind of the idea here. You know, it's a bit of a shady area. There's a big pine tree here, so that's giving shade in the morning and in the mid-afternoon.
And yeah, we have a couple bags just right here. This is Kingstropharia that we grow on our farm. And you know, if you do it right, you'll probably get some mushrooms in the fall.
Right.
You just got to keep the patch moist and in the shade.
Exactly.
And Rick has had a lot of success with this strain already on your property, right?
You bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I find it just appears, you know, 20 feet down the yard from where I put it. Sometimes it's got a mind of its own. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Rick.
No problem.
I appreciate you taking the time.
Cheers.
You can follow Rick at Cherry Permaculture. I'll leave a link for his YouTube channel below. Hopefully we'll get Rick making some videos soon. But he also has a website, and I'll leave the link for that below. Rick does consulting services and permaculture workshops, and he'll teach you how to do a space just like this. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys.